Sure, I can add that.
Yep.
That's what you want.
I think we're ready.
Yeah, not really, but that's okay. I'm muting myself.
All right, everybody mute, and Siri, take it away.
All right. Good evening. I would like to call to order the May 4th, 2020 Lake Washington School Board meeting. Please let the record reflect that all school board members are present and participating remotely. All meeting participants will also be joining us remotely in alignment with current proclamation issued by Mayor Inslee. The board meeting will be live streamed and is viewable on our district's website. If you're unable to live stream the meeting, you can call 425-936-2805 or 425-936-2809, conference ID 471683, to listen to the meeting. Regular board meetings will continue to be live streamed on the Lake Washington School District website and posted for viewing within 2 days, as long as district staff are available to support basic functions of our board meetings. Please note that we will have no in-person public comment to ensure social distancing, and all public comments should be submitted to Diane Jenkins at djenkins@lwsd.org by 1 p.m. on the day of the board meeting. So with that, I will now entertain a motion to approve the May 4th agenda.
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director LaLiberty to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, so tonight we'd like to start with some recognitions, and we do have 4 proclamations to read this evening. The first 3 will recognize 3 groups of staff members, teachers, nurses, and food service employees, for all the work that they've been doing under these extreme conditions throughout the school closure and beyond. So we would like to take this time to recognize them for their efforts to support our students and families. In addition, we will add a proclamation proclaiming May as Arts in Education Month. So with that, I have asked Director Sage to read the Teacher Appreciation Proclamation. Director Sage.
I will do so, and I will preface it by saying this is my 26th year in the district as a parent, and never have I appreciated teachers more than I do right now. Whereas teachers mold future citizens through guidance and education and keep American democracy alive, laying the foundation for good citizenship. And whereas teachers encounter students of widely differing backgrounds and our country's future depends upon providing quality education to all students, even as we transition to remote learning during these unprecedented times. And whereas teachers in Lake Washington School District deserve recognition for their hard work to help students achieve the district's vision of every student future ready, therefore we, the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors, do hereby proclaim May 4th through 8th and Tuesday, May 5th, 2020 as Teacher Appreciation Week and National Teacher Day.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We do appreciate all the work our teachers and staff have done in which to flip an educational process into this remote learning that we've been doing. So next, I have asked that Director Carlson read our school nurse proclamation.
Thanks. This may be the most understated proclamation you can imagine at this time of our lives. So, whereas children today face more complex and life-threatening health problems requiring care in school, and whereas all students have the right to have their health needs safely met while in the school setting, and whereas school nurses understand the link between health and learning and are in a position to make a positive difference for children every day, and whereas school nurses have served a critical role in improving public health and in ensuring student academic success for more than 100 years, and whereas school nurses are professional nurses who advance the well-being, academic success, and lifelong achievements of all students by serving on the front lines and providing a critical safety net for our nation's most fragile children, therefore, we, the members of the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, May 6th, 2020, as School Nurse Day in Lake Washington School District.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Director Carlson. So next, Director Stewart will proclaim for the School Nutrition Employee Proclamation.
Yes, whereas nutritious meals at school are an essential part of the school day, and whereas the staff of the district's Nutrition Services Department are committed to providing helpful, nutritious meals to the school district's children, even as school buildings are closed, and whereas Lake Washington School District has partnered with Sodexo to provide students with nutritious meal options for more than 35 years, therefore, we, the members of the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors, do hereby proclaim this week of May 4 through 8, 2020 as School Nutrition Employee Month. And let me say, I've never seen a more dedicated group of people, especially standing over a steam table in my life. I really applaud them.
Well, thank you. And as you get a chance, make sure to say thank you to all these staff members over this time frame. Feel free to send them an email. They greatly appreciate it. The last proclamation we have this evening is May as Arts in Education Month, and I will have the opportunity to read that. However, I need to make it a little bigger because I can't read it on my screen. Whereas the arts, including dance, music, theater, and visual arts, are defined as a core subject in Washington State's definition of basic education and considered an essential component of the complete and balanced education for all students, and whereas learning in and through the arts enables students to develop critical thinking and problem-solving skills, imagination and creativity, discipline, alternative ways to communicate and express feelings and ideas, and cross-cultural understanding, which supports academic success across the curriculum as well as personal growth outside the classroom. And whereas imagination and creativity are increasingly understood as critical capacities needed for success in the 21st century workforce, and whereas the arts can transform our schools into havens of creativity and exploration, places where students want to learn, teachers want to teach, and all members of the learning community are more engaged and motivated. And therefore, we, the members of the Lake Washington School District Board of Directors, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2020 as Arts in Education Month. So if you have a chance, there are lots of things currently on the web pages in which you can see drama or do dance online, all for free. So great opportunities. And so it's an exciting opportunity to build on that at this time as well. So thank you very much. And the next item is public comment, which we have not had any submitted for this day. So we will now move to the consent agenda. And I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Move approval.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by Director Stewart and seconded by Director Carlson to approve the consent agenda. Dr. Stavum, will you poll the board?
Director LaLiberty,
Yes.
Director Sage,
Yes.
Director Carlson,
Yes.
Director Stewart,
Yes.
President Bleasner.
Yes. And so with that, we will now move to our non-consent agenda. We have several items on this evening. So our first one is an application for the emergency waiver of credit-based graduation requirements to the State Board of Education for the class of 2020. So I will hand this off to Dr. Stavum.
And before I do that, I'm going to back us up just one spot to our donations for the month and read that amount.
Excellent.
And then we will go back to our credit waiver. So our donations this month, a grand total in the amount of $40,085.20, $22,935.20 coming from PTSA, and from private sources, the amount of $17,150. And those continue to, of course, go to support our schools and all of the things that we have come to appreciate about our communities. They continue to provide support even during this time of closure, and we are very appreciative of that. And so with that, I will now move us on to credit waiver. And we've got a couple of things tonight that are in light of our current closure and some of the things that have been evolving in terms of grading, we're going to talk about a few things during my superintendent report. And some of those requirements are now being put in rule or requiring a resolution that then allows us to amend a policy. So those two things are coupled together tonight, specifically for waivers. So we're going to have the resolution first, and I'll ask Mike to talk a little bit about these two things coupled together, the resolution and then the actual policy amendment that we're going to make in order to do what we need to do for our students. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Van Orden to give us just kind of a basic explanation of how the credit waiver fits with then the amendment to the policy.
Thanks. So I think we shared a bit last week. The State Board of Education put in place emergency rules giving districts the authority to waive credits that were required for graduation. And as you may know, we have the opportunity for students to waive credits that are not required for graduation in our existing policy. This was actually courses like English 12, for example. So students need 4 years of English under our graduation policy to graduate. Knowing that we are in a very different place right now and recognizing the impact that school closures has had on seniors, there's been a commitment on many levels, the legislative levels, State Department of Education, even as a district, to ensure that students' graduation is not negatively impacted by the closures. And so that was the impetus behind this particular rulemaking decision by the State Board of Education. So what the requirement for us was to submit an application to State Board of Education asking for authority as a district to be allowed to waive certain credits for students. With that, there were some requirements that we had to demonstrate. That one, we did have in place opportunities for students to earn credit, and so that's our remote learning approach that we have in place now. That we are thinking about this from an equity lens, and that we are reaching out to students and making sure that they have as many opportunities as possible. And so, as we talked about last week, we are working on attendance taking to make sure that we're tracking every single kid and we know where kids are. In addition, if and when we do start implementing waivers, we need to make sure that we're talking with students and families about the implications of waiving courses. Yes, they do allow students to graduate, but colleges and universities also have course requirements. That we also are making sure that students know that there are opportunities to continue learning. And so there has to be a conversation. As I checked last, I believe just about every district in Washington State is using this waiver process in some form or another. And so as I mentioned, what it requires of us is to submit an application to the State Board. The State Board is reviewing those applications on a cyclical basis. Ours was in the last round and was approved by the State Board. So essentially what that does is gives us as a district the authority to say we can waive state graduation requirements. The State Board allows districts to start moving forward on that. The Washington State School Directors Association, however, recommends strongly that school districts establish a resolution to formalize and make a statement as a district that this is our direction. So the resolution that's in the board packet tonight is reflective of the Washington State School Directors Association recommendation to use the resolution process. The resolution process isn't required by the State Board rulemaking or by the law that allowed for that. But again, we believe that it does make a lot of sense for us to have that resolution. Essentially what that does is gives the superintendent and designee authority to use processes to work with individual students at the school level to determine if and when this waiver would make sense for them. And we don't think it's going to be a large number of students, but we know students that because of the crisis are not able to complete classes required for graduation. Last couple words, this does require that the classes that are being waived are classes in which students are currently enrolled or would have reasonably enrolled in during the closure. And so, for example, a student who's taking civics right now who can't attend school or participate in remote learning could potentially have that requirement waived under this process. But a student, for example, who wants to waive English 9 because they didn't pass it way back when, that would not work for them because they're not currently enrolled. So again, it's a very narrow set of conditions that expires on July 31st and allows us to work with students who are in pretty tough spots to allow them to graduate. That's the extent.
Mike, do you want to go on and then just talk about the related change to the policy amendment? And then we can do motions for both of those.
So the waiver process and the resolution is a process that, again, allows the superintendent and designee to move on. There's also a policy amendment that we are looking at that makes sense for us. Again, recommended by Washington State School Directors Association for competency-based credit. So here again is an opportunity for seniors that, again, couldn't complete a particular class, or were trying to recover credit, for example, in a class like algebra. So we have an example of a student who moved in halfway through their 9th grade year. So they weren't able to complete the 9th grade algebra course. They were in the process of recovering credit for that right now, but with the school closure, that puts them in a tough spot. Well, this same student met standard on the state Smarter Balanced Assessment for math. And so using competency credit allows that student to recover that or get competency-based credit for that 9th grade semester of algebra. So what this requires is a change to our graduation policy. We're putting it in as an amendment again for the remainder of this year that would allow students to earn competency credit in a very narrow range of conditions. So that would be passing the Smarter Balanced Assessment in either ELA or math would allow the student to earn a half a credit of English or math for 9th or 10th grade courses that they didn't pass or were not able to take as 9th or 10th graders. Would also allow students who passed a next most rigorous or next most advanced course, for example, English 11, to earn credit for English 10. Again, this would be for this year's class of 2020 only, and then it expires at the end of this class. We do, again, this one is probably the number of students you could count on a single hand in any one of our schools. 1 to 5 students. I put a few examples in the board packet. I mentioned one already. Another was a student who is enrolled in Running Start. This would allow that student who was working on credit recovery and met standard on SBA to get that credit taken care of, and so that they can focus on getting through their Running Start classes. So again, 1 to 3 students, 1 to 5 students at any given school. But again, it's a counselor meeting with the student to see if they have either Smarter Balanced or a class that's next in line to earn credit for that. And again, because it's a policy change, it would require that we amend our policy 2410.
So if you want to put a hand up, we would take questions about either of those. Otherwise, we need 2 separate motions, one for the resolution and then one for amending the policy. And I don't see any hands up. Okay, so you want to move ahead with the motion for Resolution 2289.
So move that we approve the resolution as presented.
Do I hear a second? This is on the,
Second.
so it's been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director Stewart to approve the resolution as presented for the emergency waiver. Is there any discussion?
Point of clarification. Dr. Stavum said 2289. Is that the correct resolution number?
Yes, 2290 was on, and we're going to move that to the next board meeting, so this is 2289. Okay. Thank you for asking.
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Yep.
Any other discussion on the emergency waiver?
Not really. I just want to say thanks for pulling together the numbers on this, and I understand the situation, and I think I'm very happy to let you guys be the professionals that you are, so to trust your judgment on these things, so go for it.
All right, now, this is one of those times when there needs to be flexibility in what we do, so it's great to have that outlined and that you're pretty clear that it's very specific to those things as well. So I think that's helpful in being able to ensure that our students graduate future ready, and at the same time, we recognize the situation where we're in. So hearing no further discussion, I will entertain a vote. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Okay, so the next one will be
the second motion.
Yep,
right?
this is
for the
to amend.
competency-based credit, but it is this is a different motion that will be needed. We will have to move to approve the waiving of the first reading because it's a policy.
Correct.
And we're moving directly to the second reading and adoption of a competency-based credit amendment to policy 2410P.
I move that the board waive a first reading and moves to the second reading and adoption of the competency-based credit amendment to policy 2410P for the class of 2020.
Well done, Eric. I'll second that.
So it has been moved by Director LaLiberty and seconded by Director Carlson that we do waive that first reading and move to our second reading and adoption of the competency-based credit amendment to policy 2410P for the class of 2020 as presented. Any discussion?
Only that, thank you again to staff for answering some of the questions we had about this for today, and I think I'm really happy that we're going forward with this.
All right, hearing no further discussion or seeing hands raised on the participant list, all those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, motion carries.
Aye.
There you go. Good job.
I think we captured everyone. Just to be sure, Director Stewart, were you intending an aye or a nay?
I did twice.
Okay, we got you.
So the motion has passed at 5-0.
Great.
Okay. So thank you for working through these different components that need to take place in which to ensure our students are well served. And so the next item on the agenda, we have two non-consent items. They are both having to do with facilities this evening. So I will pass this off to Dr. Steele.
Yep, and just to clarify, just for 2 minutes before we move on, what we pulled for the next meeting is a resolution that we just got Friday. We weren't sure what the deadline was going to be when it was originally talked about at the state level. The deadline was going to be May 12th for passing it. That deadline got extended to the 29th. And just for clarity, we decided to move it. We had left a placeholder in our agenda just to make sure. That resolution goes with what school districts are doing in terms of waiving the required days and hours because of the closure. And so boards are going to be asked to pass a resolution in alignment with the WAC that OSPI has put in motion. And so just for clarification, that's what that will be related to, and so we'll take care of that at our next meeting. There's a lot of moving parts, and as we evolve, it's a lot to kind of keep track of between grading and then the requirements for all districts. So thank you for hanging with us on all of that. So for our strategic plan connection tonight, we have two facility-related items. The first one is an update on Juanita High School, and Brian and Barbara are going to give you just a brief presentation on this. As you know, our high school is looking beautiful, and I need to drive over there myself. I was near it and didn't pull in the other day because I needed to get to another meeting. But what we want to make sure is that entire campus looks as beautiful as possible, including the field house. So we're going to give you an update tonight on what we're looking at for making sure that the field house blends well with our beautiful new high school. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian and Barbara to share some vision of that.
Okay. And so I'm going to share my desktop. Let me know when you guys can see it.
Victory.
Here we go.
Okay. So I'm going to put in presentation. Okay. So this is a presentation on the field house and pool proposed upgrades. So this is the existing site plan, and you can see the new academic building there in white. And what we're talking about here is the field house and pool. And so here are some photos of the new building, and you can see it also is adjacent to the older building, which is the field house and pool. So we just wanted to give you perspective here on what the new building is looking like compared to the older field house. And this we're showing you is because this is one of the proposals we have, is to apply some of the new metal siding to the exterior of the field house. And these are just close-up views of what that metal siding looks like. And here are some pictures of the existing field house. Again, you can see the color scheme and the old exterior envelope next to the new building is somewhat drastic. Okay, so our recommendation for upgrades to the field house is going to be phased. So we asked the architect to provide us with options to phase upgrades to the building exterior, and then knowing that we'll have to eventually upgrade the interior of the pool itself. So the first phase is for exterior refurbishment, and the scope includes painting the field house, pool, and gym in colors to match the new academic building. It includes partially cladding the field house with the metal siding to match the new academic building. It would replace the wood cornice, and that's the decorative wrapping around the top of the field house, with new metal cornice, and then have some new exterior Rebel graphics and signage. But we would be keeping the existing canopies. The work would be, we'd begin the work in June and complete it in the fall. The pricing we have is $650,000. It currently fits within our contractor's contingency. So the mobilized contractor that's currently there would continue with this work. And then we have some renderings here of similar views than what we showed you with the photograph. So the west wall and the corner, which is the northwest corner, would be wrapped from about 6 feet high and up with the metal siding. And then the rest of the building would be painted similar painting color schemes of the existing building. And then these views are like coming up from the field itself, how that you would blend these two buildings together. Okay, so questions?
One of the things that we talked about as this project has progressed is that it doesn't make sense to have a beautiful, newly remodeled high school and then have kind of an eyesore sitting next to it that doesn't make the entire campus look cohesive and look like it has all been upgraded. And at the same time, there's probably some future possibilities for the field house, and so it's that balance of making things look better and appropriate, but still allowing for any further renovations that may need to take place in the future if something would be placed on a bond. So that's kind of the balance that we're looking for. So with that, we have a couple of hands up. I don't know who was first, so Eric, I'm going to call on you first.
Cassandra is first.
Oh, okay, then let's go with Cassandra. I wasn't watching order.
I'm okay. You could take my turn. I don't mind. So assuming that nothing is being done to upgrade the pool itself.
Correct. Not inside the actual infrastructure in the pool itself is not being refurbished with this recommendation. This is just an exterior refurbishment. Yeah.
But there has been a study done, and you could talk about that a little bit. And so there are, we know there's future needs. This is mainly to take care of that exterior view right now. But Brian, you could talk just a little bit about kind of what we do know.
Yeah, so we had McKinstry do a full assessment of the pool, and McKinstry is the energy services provider that's doing the Hartman pool for the city of Redmond. And so they performed an assessment that basically looked at all of the infrastructure of the pool and the field house itself, the mechanical infrastructure, and gave us estimates on what it would take to fully refurbish the pool and the locker rooms and the other
Concessions.
offices and equipment inside the field house. That doesn't include the actual courts, the gym courts, but everything west of the gym courts.
So I think that's a separate conversation that the board will need to have about that facility itself for, you know, some bigger scale remodeling and refurbishing. But this is separate from what that larger project would be.
Thank you. I wanted to ask for clarification because I know I will be asked, so I appreciate that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Eric?
I have two questions. The first is, you mentioned there'd be on slide, looks like 6, there's reference to no change to the canopy or canopies. What could you explain what that? I don't think I have the right slide. Oh, I do. Great. Keep existing canopies. What does that mean?
Yeah, so here's a good picture. Let's see. This canopy section here in the lower left rendering of what is, I'm on slide 7 now. Though that's the existing canopy. As we look at the same view here, that's this section here where the canopy would still remain as part of the old building, and we wouldn't rebuild those. We would just paint them accordingly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
The other question I have is, I'm assuming that by doing these exterior, I guess, modifications, we don't run any risk of, I don't know, running into any problems that would also need to be repaired, or that would require, additional work. I guess to crystallize my question, I mean, by doing this, I mean, we're not going to see later, we took off, when we started changing the siding, we realized we needed to also do X, Y, Z.
Asbestos
Is there a
removal.
risk of that happening?
Although there could be some risk that you get there, and there could be unknowns there. But for the most part, we've asked to be able to phase these improvements so that if we take on bigger improvements in the future, we're not throwing away work that we've previously done. So this work on the exterior would allow us to do future work inside and future roofing work, because we have to extend the life of the roof in the future. So all of these phases would go together in the hopes of not throwing away any of that work.
So
I guess what I'm worried about is by doing this work, is there any risk of triggering a requirement to do additional? We take the siding off, we see dry rot or something. Is there risk of that?
Yeah, I would say that there is some relative risk of that, but we also have assessed that the dry rot on the wood cornice, for example, that we're aware of, and so it's already priced in there. What we are doing by fail-safing it in phases is that if we do this work and then we decide to either do the roof or refurbish the infrastructure of the pool, we don't have to throw away any of this work that's planned. So by doing this work and settling on what this first phase is, we're able to say that future work will include this first phase.
And I think, Brian, this is Barbara, I think the other thing you could, I mean, most of it is it's painting, so you're not peeling back walls and you're putting the cladding over what's there, so you're not peeling back anything. Is that correct, Brian?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that addresses what you're asking, Eric, is are we going to be peeling back walls and then finding things? And the answer is no, we're really painting and putting cladding over what's existing.
Siri?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just have a question. So knowing that everything costs money, this falls within the bonds that you had stated within 2016 and what's available there. By doing this exterior, will we be extending the life of the building in this process, or is this more maintenance?
Yes, we will be extending the life of the envelope. Not fully because it's a full system, but yes, by painting and improving the siding, you're extending the life of the envelope.
Do you have any idea how long?
Well, the metal siding, I'd have to go back and get a number for you on the metal siding, but the metal siding, once it goes up, it's the same life as what's next to it with the new building. And then painting is usually 15 to 25 years.
Okay. Just because the cost associated with the maintenance on the pool, the other piece we've been speaking about a lot and wanting to be able to address that. So
Yeah.
Do you have any idea as to what the overall cost is that McKinstry has put out?
Yeah, they gave us a range, and on a high range, if we escalated it to the 2022's dollars, it would be 22.4 million.
Okay, so this is a much smaller portion of that we can do now in which to be able to align it better with the current building that's there.
Correct, and we've also asked about, if we're going to go refurbish the entire pool, does this building need more daylighting? Should we be planning for more windows that we would, thus this metal cladding would be covering in the future? And what we heard back was actually the building as it is a good building for a pool because windows don't necessarily do well with chlorinated pools. And so they actually recommend that this building would serve well as a future pool.
Yep, but a much larger project. So this is just strictly cosmetic, and at a later date, I think the full scope of what that project looks like would need to come back to the board. But this is really just so we have an entire campus that looks like it belongs together. Eric, did you have your hand back up?
I do.
Good.
I know you're trying to keep us from getting ahead of ourselves and asking about the future work, but as I think about this, a concern I have is if we're doing this largely, what is mostly cosmetic work to the exterior of the field house. If later, when it comes time to think about what to do with the future of the field house, if I'm concerned that future may be, what if the report is to tear it down entirely and build anew? Then I feel like we'll have wasted this money on exterior cosmetic changes. So I don't know that I've ever seen this report. Has it been provided to us, and does it recommend does it make a recommendation as to renovate or replace the field house? Is that something it analyzes?
Eric, I'll address that. No, the report is not recommending that the whole building be taken down. It is mainly similar to what the city of Redmond is doing, is refurbishing the pool itself. Draining the pool, making sure the body where the water is, redoing the concrete in the pool and doing that. So that is something we're planning for next facility update, is to get you more information on the pool, and we can share the report at that time.
So I guess what I was searching for is, when we're talking about building new schools, we do these new and loose studies. And I think almost 99, not 100% of the time, the recommendation of the new and loose study is to tear down and replace rather than remodel. It was a similar, does this report, did it do a similar study? And if not, would one be done in the future?
We did not have them do a new and loose study, but that's something we can look into. We do know that the cost to rebuild a pool is much more significant than to refurbish what is already there. But we can talk about that.
Okay.
I think,
So,
yeah, Director Carlson has a question, then I have a comment. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so the MAC doesn't have a raise your hand function, so I'm just going to barge in when I have comments. I, for whatever reason, can't find the original slides. So, Brian, could you just show us the slide 6 again? I appreciate that we're trying to do something that's within the current budget on the contractor contingency, but $650,000 for a little bit of siding and a paint job seems like a big number. And I'm concerned that maybe there are better places we could use $650,000 around our district for something that's structural and not just cosmetic. That's 3 portables installed, right?
1.5.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry, with installation, okay. Yeah, so anyway, it's something that I'm a little bit worried about, something where we're putting lipstick on a building that's as old as I am and pretending that it's making it part of the system. So, you know, I guess $650,000 sounds like a lot for a coat of paint, and I'd like to understand and be able to explain to constituents that, oh no, that's what it costs us to paint a building, which would lead me to think that maybe there's a business opportunity in painting schools. So anyway, so please tell me why this is a $650,000 cosmetic job.
Yeah, it's a good question. The paint is one piece of it. It's a very large building. And the metal siding, which is really cladding one side of the building, the west side that faces the new academic building, and then partially as you drive up, that metal siding is a cost. And then the decorative cornice, that's just really decorative. But again, the wood that's currently on there is well beyond its useful life. So by replacing it with metal, we are extending the life of the envelope of this building.
Okay.
Brian, there is an option to just paint, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So,
Well, and
no, go ahead.
that's all right. So okay. So if the replacing it with siding potentially extends the life of the envelope, why is replacing siding on this one side of the building extending the envelope when the other 3/4 of the building aren't getting reclad?
Yeah, it's more to tie in the two buildings, right?
Right.
So that they tie in.
I got to admit, my gut instinct is that in our current space crisis, it's not a good idea to spend a significant amount of money on something that ultimately isn't anything more than cosmetic tie. A paint job I can justify. I can explain to people we got a paint building. But putting cladding on when we could just paint isn't something I'm sure I could get behind, unless you can convince me otherwise.
Brian, can you go back to the time, I wasn't here at the time, to what the original conversation was regarding the field house when Juanita was being reimagined?
As far as how it relates to the current project?
Right. If it was discussed, if there was money, was there a plan to do this? Was it just, we're going to wait and see? Because I will tell you from the beginning, it was very puzzling to me as to why you would have this beautiful new high school and then still have the field house relatively untouched, and seems to me to be kind of a disservice to the entire project to not have some version of a field house that fits the entire renovated picture. But I wasn't here when that was initially discussed, and so I would like just a little bit of a history lesson on that, Brian.
So in the 2014 bond, we went out and included in the project was the gym portion of the field house. What wasn't included was the pool. And so the pool was going to go away, and then the equivalent to the gym would be created with the new school. And that bond failed. And so when we went out for the 16 bond, we took the pool and the field house and removed it from consideration, and then that is the bond that passed. So, and there was lots of debate before I was here around the pool and the field house, and whether we could build a new field house and not a pool, or whether you could build both. And Barbara, you probably remember those conversations better than I.
Yeah, I mean, and that's accurate. Is the community, there was a proposal to not replace the pool, and that was a concern with some of our community members. And so ultimately, the package that we presented kept the pool and the field house in place, and then built a new Juanita around that. And so, there wasn't at the time when we're building the budgets, we didn't also address in the budget the field house upgrading the exterior. So this has really been something, now that the project is close to being done, we've looked at the project budget, and within the contingency of not just the bond budget, but the contractor contingency within the Juanita High School project, there is some room that otherwise the district would get those funds back. So we could use those funds that were already planned for Juanita High School and fund the exterior improvements on that. So we could provide a breakout of paint versus cladding if necessary.
Yeah, we'd be happy to bring back just the paint only option. What I guess I would have to say is I would hate to have this look completely unfinished if we have the opportunity to do some measure of a cosmetic work on it, so that it doesn't look like it's an afterthought, or that we weren't thinking about the campus as a whole in terms of the cosmetic piece. The inside of that building, I get that's a whole different deal, but I still think we owe it to the entire campus picture to make sure that it looks like it's a completed version of what is sitting on that site.
Right. So, Jane, a big part of the conversations back when we were talking about taking it out was making it part of the renovation, was around the fact that as a community, Juanita finds the field house as a big key part of their identity.
Right.
And the challenge became that getting a new field house plus a new theater and trying to keep the pool, they couldn't have all the facilities that they wanted and be in line with what we've done at the other schools. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of been this unique thing up in Juanita that the community wanted to preserve. And yes, it was a cost-saving measure, but at the same time, it was a strong advocacy for preserving that.
Right.
So I appreciate the idea of tying it in, but again, I am somewhat reluctant in a school district where we have space problems out the wazoo to spend any money out of a bond for more than paint on something that the community really wanted to preserve.
Mark, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Thank you. I also have a problem with this. I mean, not only is it just cosmetic, I mean, it's like putting lipstick on a pig. It's still going to be a bad inside to begin with. It's only going to look at it from the outside. The idea of making it look better from the outside just for cosmetic purposes also demeans the fact that when we go back in to try and build a new field house, then people are going to say, well, it looks so nice from the outside. Well, no. It has some extra paint on it. It has some new siding. But the interior is still going to need the renovations that it has needed for years, as well as the pool. I just don't see, again, one, spending the money, but two, shooting ourselves in the foot when we have to come back to folks and say, look, this field house needs to be restored. And to me, it's kind of make people think that it's gives an illusion that there's the insides are just as nice as the outside.
Director LaLiberty, your hand is up.
Sounds like you're muted, Eric.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think he's muted.
How about now?
There we go.
You missed out. It was gold that I was saying.
I knew it.
So to me, this makes sense if it is part of if it's phase one of a plan to refurbish and remodel the field house. But to me, it only makes sense if it's that way. And if we're not certain that it is something that part of the long-term plan for the field house is to eventually refurbish the interior, then I think this doesn't make sense. And right now, I certainly don't know the answer to that threshold question. So that's what I'm really wrestling with.
So what I think I'm hearing from all of you is that you'd like more information on what that larger renovation could look like based on the study that has been conducted, and that we, at the very least, would bring back the cost of what paint only would be without a little more extensive covering on the outside, and have maybe another discussion on this. I do think one thing you need to think about is how long does it sit there, given what we don't know about funding for a next project, and what does that also project to our community about the care that we take, even if it's just a temporary, cosmetic version of that does fall still within available funds for that project. But I think you've all raised really good points. So if you're agreeable to that, I think we'll plan to bring back those two things at an upcoming board meeting, if that would work.
Sounds good to me.
Just one quick follow-up on that.
Sure.
The timeline in one of those slides, I think, called for this work to start, if we were to approve it, to start in June or very soon. The idea, I think, with it, to have it done when the school reopens. So I guess, I mean, if we do want to go forward, then I would like to see that happen. I still don't know that I want to go forward with it, but I think if we do, I want it to move quickly so that it would, in fact, be done in September. So I'm just wondering, is it feasible to provide some of the information that we requested at our next board meeting so that I just think I'd like this decision, to the extent it can be, to be made quickly so that this work could get done if that is our
Yes.
hard decision.
Yep, I think that's realistic. And the other thing is that if we go with a lesser version of this, and Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming the timeline would shorten up a little bit if it was paint only. Is that correct?
Correct. We'd have to do some additional repair to the wood cornice, but yes, you're correct.
Barbara?
So I apologize, I got dropped off in that process. In following through, that makes sense. I was hearing the same thing. There's concerns about the cost associated in sort of the long term, and how is it extending our facilities and where the dollars are used. So that would be appreciated. And also then just looking at saying how it does bring value to the building. I understand the aesthetics and the fact of the Juanita High School. And that's important. At the same time, being able to make clear to the value it brings to the facility as well, and bringing it forward would be important to have that statement in the 18th.
Okay, we will move to do that update on the 18th.
Thank you.
Great, thank you for the feedback. Next, Barbara is going to give the board an update. As you know, our Facility Advisory Committee has continued to meet, and I would say rather successfully. When we first said we were going to continue those meetings virtually, I wasn't sure how that would work, and it has gone pretty well. And so we just wanted to let you know where we are in the process, and we'll be bringing the details of the draft that the committee will be making to the board, so we won't get into all of the nitty-gritty tonight, but we just wanted you to know where we are in the process as we kind of head into June shortly, June, July, August, and then how that fits with kind of next steps. So Barbara, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I am going to share my screen. And Jane, let me know that you can see it.
You are on, and if you put it
All
into
right.
presentation mode.
Presentation mode. And so I will start with our Facility Advisory Committee update. And just a reminder of the purpose of our committee. We brought the committee together last November to make recommendations for our future facility planning, align with our district strategic plan, and make recommendations to accommodate our rapid enrollment growth. And we will be bringing those recommendations to the board to plan for future ballot measures. So this supports our strategic plan under effective use of resources and our facilities and technology systems. The committee is both looking at, non-traditional options for district space, talking about community partnerships, innovative school models, and convening the task force, which we did last November. So as a reminder, we have the committee is facilitated by Penny Mabey. She's a senior associate with environment issues. We have a technical team of district staff that includes myself, Brian Buck, Chris Brennigan, Shannon Parthamer, and Laura DeGoyer. We have a committee makeup of 33 members, 22 parents and community members, our city one representative from each city, Kirkland, Redmond, and Sammamish. We have 3 teachers on the committee, 4 building administrators, and 1 central office administrator. Our superintendent, Dr. Stabum, has been in attendance at every meeting, and Eric is the board representative on the committee. So we originally scheduled 7 meetings. We added 1 meeting. They started at the end of November. And as Dr. Stabum said, we went virtual starting with our March meeting. We did have to reschedule that meeting to April 2nd. And so since then, we've held 3 virtual meetings, and they have been very well attended. And we've really enjoyed doing these meetings over Zoom. You can do breakout rooms, and so that's been, because they're facilitated by our consultant, we're using Zoom with those meetings. Anyway, and our last meeting is May 21st. So this is just going over the topics, and I won't read all these, but these were the topics of our meetings. And then we also planned for community feedback, and I'll talk about, we did do the community engagement between meeting 3 and 4, and then I'll talk about kind of decisions about the next steps for community engagement. So the first 3 meetings, November through January, we focused on reviewing and kind of getting the committee up to speed on the district's enrollment information, enrollment growth, capacity challenges, showing them capacity at each of our buildings, explaining how capacity is determined. We provided the committee information on our building assessment and conditions. We provided them information on the portables that we have in the district, and also shared information on our vacant and undeveloped property. We also brought in Flow Analytics, who provided the committee with the 10-year enrollment forecast, and then also building utilization forecast. And they provided that forecast in mid-February and shared it with the Facility Advisory Committee and the board back in February. So this is just some visuals of the facility, or the Flow Analytics projections, showing the grade level projections through 2029-30 school year. And basically they're projecting a growth of 4,500 students in the next 10 years, or a 14% enrollment growth. Some other visuals just showing these maps. The next couple maps I'll show you is the percentage utilization of capacity for our schools. So a school with the color red is overutilized, meaning over capacity by about 111%, where schools in the blue, the dark blue, are at 80% or less capacity. So basically in 10 years, these reflect what the capacities will be in 10 years. And 23 out of 29 elementary schools will be at or over capacity in 10 years. And we're considering 90% at or over capacity, just because we know as those schools get closer to being full, it creates it continues to create challenges. So this is the elementary view. At the middle school, 6 out of 8 middle schools will be at or over capacity in 10 years. And you can see primarily in the middle of the district, the Lake Washington learning area with Rose Hill, Redmond, and then Finn Hill as well. And then 3 out of 4 high schools will be at or over capacity in 10 years.
There it is.
So this chart, and it's a little hard to read because it's it encompasses the whole district. What this shows is the forecasted development activity in the next 10 years, and the anything in blue is single family, and there's a lot of smaller dots, and they're harder to see in blue. And then anything in the light buff color is multifamily units, and then red is what they call speculative units. So they're not planned yet, but we know that there's capacity for, what is the word I'm looking for? Anyway, not capacity, but the land use that will allow more units. And so as you can see in the center of in Redmond, the center of the district, there's a lot of development going on. And then in the Totem Lake area, in the upper left quadrant, a lot of multifamily development going on. And then in Sammamish, in the lower right of the district, in Sammamish Town Center, is also multifamily growth going on. And the larger this dot, the more housing units there are in that area. So those are some graphics that Flow Analytics was able to provide the committee for information. So the other thing we did, we said we wanted to engage the community between our January meeting and our February meeting. And so we used our Thought Exchange tool to survey the community, and we asked them what are the most important perspectives to consider as we plan for future facilities to accommodate growth in our district. And we had a really great turnout through Thought Exchange. It was a really good tool to use, and we had 1,259 participants who provided over 1,400 thoughts and rated 42,000 ratings of those thoughts. And so this is what they call a word cloud, showing some of the key words. You can see overcrowded, growth, portables, population, future, size. And then at the February 27th meeting, the fourth meeting, the Facility Advisory Committee discussed the comments from the Thought Exchange. And just major themes that were discussed on the Thought Exchange were aging facilities, athletic facilities, where to build, what to build, how to build, choice school, a lot of feedback on choice schools, enrollment growth, how to fund facilities, planning for future growth, and space. And we will be posting, we got behind because of our school closure, and so we should have today the Thought Exchange results posted on our website. So we'll send a link to the board on that, and we're getting a message out to the community through Connections. And one of the things the committee talked about when the results, or sometimes you get contrasting views. Some members of the community said build schools with extra space so that there's room for the future. And then others expressed, they hated to see new schools with space not being utilized. So that contrast that the committee kind of had to, discuss and talk about. And the Thought Exchange also kind of showed the committee, and they recommended to the district to continue educating the community about growth, how we work with our cities and construction in order to dispel rumors and myths that are out there in the community. So we're going to continue to share through our Building on Success newsletters and help share information to help with some of the things that we heard through the thought exchange. So at that meeting in February, we also had what we call a workshop, and that was when the committee began developing preliminary proposals. So based on all the enrollment projection information they saw, the capacity numbers, they began to work on proposals. And what you see is a picture of a sticky wall that's used. And so subcommittees, at the meeting, we broke up into small groups, and each group worked on an area or an elementary, middle, high school recommendations. They put those up on the sticky wall, and then the whole committee could talk about them and discuss them. And then outside the meeting, a small subcommittee began to work on written recommendations. That work continued through March and through April. And then we had our first virtual meeting on April 2nd, and where we shared funding options, how construction is funded, the different choices, bonds and levies. We reviewed project construction costs, how much does an elementary school cost, how much does a middle school cost, etc. And the committee discussed strategies for funding future projects. And at the meeting 6 and 7 on April 16th and 30th, the subcommittee shared with the full committee draft recommendations. And then the district also shared a presentation on innovations in school buildings. And so there's some pictures, the pictures there. The one on the bottom left is a private school in Seattle that is a 6-story urban school. And you can see, it's right, sidewalks, there's no parking, it looks like, or it's underneath the building. And then the picture on the top right is a private school in Seattle in an urban area. And that is the top level of the building, which is open to the outside. So it's an outdoor play space. And then the committee also during these meetings, we asked them, our original plan was to have community engagement between the April and May meeting, and they recommended right now to delay additional community engagement until the fall. Just because given all that's going on with this school closure, they wanted to make sure people had their full attention when they engaged with the district. So the committee is working on recommended projects by level and by learning area, and they're beginning to prioritize those projects. And so what they're working on next is the last scheduled meeting is May 21st, and they're going to finalize the recommendations. And then we believe by the June 22nd board meeting, we can present the final recommendations, knowing though that we do still want to get community feedback in the fall. And so just a reminder, we'll get that feedback in the fall, and then we are continuing to post materials on our website and put regular articles in Connections and Bond e-News. So that is the end of my presentation. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
And I just want to clarify, if people are watching too, that these are recommendations for that facility plan, the long-term facility plan, not recommendations about a specific school, or I don't want people to be confused with the pictures that were on there. But with that, I do think, and Eric, you can tell me if I'm off or not, the presentation that we had that featured those two schools and many others, I think was something that the committee really enjoyed, that I think would also be something good to weave into the board. Seeing that at some point as you kind of digest this report and then begin to look to the future, just because it was really interesting. Eric, you want to comment on that?
No, agreed.
So I think we could schedule that maybe shortly after you see the full recommendations from the committee for the facility advisory plan. And let's see, Cassandra has her hand up.
I do. I'm just curious, as time goes by, if the committee is going to consider the impact of the global pandemic and what education looks like going forward.
This committee is working on kind of doing the updated facility or the updated long-term facility plan. I think that was what we tasked them with and what our goal has been all along. But I do think related conversations have to be, what is the impact of this? Part of that is when you see what enrollment projections are going to continue to look like. Part of it is the future of online education and what our students tell us about their thoughts for being on campus or off, and what measure of flexibility does that give us for the types of buildings that we want. Of course, that conversation will be after my time, but I think that's what every district that's been experiencing rapid growth like this one has to be part of that conversation. I think what we need to do is finish this particular part of that journey, and then still incorporate that into, here is what the committee has said, knowing now that that may or may not influence things going forward.
Do we have any students on the committee? I missed that part.
No,
At
we
this time, we
have
do not.
Okay. That would be an interesting voice to hear as we move forward with related things.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we've talked about too is, what would the district want to have is either a standing group. A lot of people were really interested in the innovative design concept. And so I think there will be some things from the recommendations that the board would be able to say, yes, let's move forward and kind of have this continued discussion or work around specific elements of the facility plan that are probably needing some of those different voices as part of that process.
Thank you.
So what I would like to add on to that, the innovative schools was actually a recommendation at the very little paragraph at the end of the original one. So continuing to do that, so looking at that going forward for our agenda and work plan next year would make sense as these recommendations come through, if this is coming out as a positive. I do think being able to envision and including online concept and remote learning, what does that mean? How does that play into it as well? I think those are some of the bigger conversations we can start to play into next year.
Yep. Good. Any other questions or comments?
I want to say thank you to the work that's been done with the Facility Advisory Committee and bringing this forward. Postponing the community feedback probably makes sense so that it can have a little more attention paid to at that time. So we just want to be clear that these aren't final recommendations of any kind. They are available for discussion and revision after the fact as well. So that's great. So appreciate all the work and the engagement of the committee and being able to do so and tackling it through a remote place as well. Zoom does have some nice opportunities with the breakout groups. It does do a nice job.
It does. Yep. And Penny may be our facilitator. We need to give her props because she's done a nice job of adapting to that online facilitation picture, which is different than in person, and she's kept the group moving along. So we really appreciate her work too. And Barbara has been a great collaborator with her as they've prepped materials and gotten everything ready for those meetings. So great job to that whole team. Okay.
It's been a great group to work with, and we've got a really dedicated committee, and so it's been great.
Yeah, they're a productive group, and I have to say, I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was when we continued to have over 30 participants for our remote meetings. So they are in it for the long haul, and we really appreciate that. All right, I have to see what, Chris, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say thank you. You're staying ahead of the curve, but slide 10 scares the crap out of me. 4,500 more students. We're back where we started, dang it. So.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what the trajectory does after the whole pandemic effect.
Well, the kids are going to survive it.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Hearing none, with that, I would say thank you very much, and we look forward to the recommendations coming forward.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is our superintendent report around the remote learning that is going on. So Dr. Stavum, I will pass that off to you.
Thank you. Yep, remote learning continues. People are learning a lot. We're hearing things continue to be fine-tuned, which is our goal from now until really June 19th when our school year technically ends. With that, we've also been processing the things that I referred to earlier with guidance from OSPI, some of the requirements that we needed to take care of. And so one of the updates that we want to provide tonight is a big one, and that's around grading. And as I have told you just a little bit, this has been an interesting thing to have left up to districts to kind of decide what they were going to do within some of the parameters established by OSPI. And I will tell you just in my own thinking, and I think this is true of many of us, kind of where we started and where we are ending up, we've kind of gone full circle. And a lot of that has come due to the feedback that we received. And so we appreciate all of the feedback that we've gotten from our students and our parents and our teachers, and really working through a process. We did not rush to put guidance out there, and that was because we wanted to take time to really think about the impact. One of the things that we have learned, among many, is really the depth of the impact that this closure has had on our students and families. And this is a unique experience because a lot of times, district will have something happen, but the variable of classrooms and school kind of stays the same while the other pieces may have changed in a community. If you have a natural disaster, if you have a situational crisis in a building, but the rest of the world kind of continues on as it was. Here we have both sides of the variability where we have teachers who are not in their natural habitat of their classrooms with all of the variables that they have in their homes as they are trying to do their very best, and we have the variability of our students and what their families are experiencing. And that looks different for every version of that you can think of, and our feedback captured a lot of that. And so as we think about grading tonight, part of the guidance that OSPI provided and that we would believe no matter what is that during this time of closure, our goal is to first of all do no harm, and knowing that we want to continue the opportunity to learn, but that doesn't look like it normally does. And so we want to honor the work that has happened long before the closure happened, and this is kind of an isolated point in time. And then we know learning is going to continue after we've gotten through the worst of this closure. And what we are doing right now for this point in time probably won't look the same when we begin in the fall. That may be because we're able to start coming back on site. It may be because of what we decide to do for online or remote learning, if that has to continue. So I want to stress that this is for this main period of closure right now, from when schools were told to close doors to when we can actually close doors at the end of our school year. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mike to talk about the process that we've used to get that feedback, the conversations that have been held with a lot of different groups, and then where we are going with grading from now until the end of the year to provide what we think is a validation of the work of our students, but also relieving some stress and anxiety and doing what we need to for this brief point in time. So with that, Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jane. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
So as we were sharing, Dr. Sabin was sharing, this has been a process, and I wanted to give you a little bit of context for that process before we jump into some of the things we found as we were working through it. So back in April, which was less than a month ago, we were working under the assumption that there was, as always, districts have control over grading processes. That has traditionally been the way that we do grading in the state of Washington. And so during break, we brought together a number of different task forces, including groups of secondary folks who worked on guidance for high schools and middle schools. We had elementary folks who were working on guidance and identifying supports for elementary schools. We also pulled together a group that helped us think about grading. And at the time, again, we were working under districts have say in how they do grading. And so like most districts in Washington state, we were looking at an option of a pass, no credit, or a pass, no pass for secondary schools. At the elementary school level, we were looking at identifying which standards have been taught and where have students been engaged in participating in work. And so that was, again, similar to what most districts in the state were doing. We were having some discussion and debate about whether or not to give our high school students the option of requesting a letter grade on their transcript. And again, that seemed like a really fair way of doing the work, that most students would request a pass. Colleges and universities were telling us that they were going to acknowledge that, and that was going to work out okay. Everything's good. So everything was lined up. We were giving folks direction. At the same time, we started to get hints from the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction that they were going to be providing updated guidance. And that was happening in both formal and informal meetings. We're part of regional network meetings with superintendents and directors of teaching and learning, and we had representatives from OSPI telling us, well, it might be guidance that just gives you some ways of thinking about grading. It could also be direction. And so we were very intentional about not finalizing our direction, particularly for high school and high school grades where credit is attached to them. And we said, we're going to wait until we have that guidance. Other districts didn't do that. And as a result of that, those districts had to pull back grading systems that they had pushed out and they had told parents about and they had told teachers about and they started using. So we waited, and then on April 20th, OSPI did come out with some guidance and direction, essentially saying that they were going to require that every district in the state use letter grades, with the exception of failures. You could not assign an F. So you could not use the pass-fail option. You also could not allow students to work under an old system like you had before. So if you had if you had already kind of rolled out your pass-fail, pass-no credit, you had to go back and restart. What they did say, though, is that there were options in there to say, yes, you could assign letter grades, but you don't have to use all of the letter grades. You could use an A, B, or an ABC, or an A, B, C, D. And that's kind of where we were at the time, thinking that, well, if that's going to be what we have to do, that's probably where we're going to land, some combination of letter grades. Again, though, even with the guidance that came out on the 20th, there was still some ambiguity in it. For example, they said that you, instead of a failing grade, you could assign or you should assign an incomplete. But they didn't give a lot of direction about what exactly was that and under what circumstances could you assign an incomplete. One way of reading their guidance was that incomplete could be considered a lower grade, for example. And that was one of the things they said you couldn't do, is you couldn't lower students' grades. So in addition, on the 20th, they said, well, we'll come out within the next week or two with some more guidance and some more clarification to explain what we meant when we said all of these things that came out in this first round. So again, we worked with that guidance, but we were also being fairly cautious because we know, again, if you start pushing out ideas to folks and pushing out new ways of doing things, that you may end up pulling them back. And so we reconvened the group that was working on grading back in spring break. We read through the guidance. We had a number of questions, particularly around if you're assigning grades, can you assign incompletes? What does it mean to maintain grades, et cetera? And so while we were waiting for that additional guidance, we also did some work to get some surveys developed for families and staff. And we also surveyed our students. And so we'll share that information with you tonight. Once we had all that information and once OSPI actually did come out with that new guidance, then we were able to pull all the pieces together and make the plan that we have that we'll share with you tonight. So that information, our task force compiled, put together, ranked some different options. We also shared that with our high school principals, and then we brought a final kind of proposal into superintendent's cabinet. Even there, though, Dr. Stavrum reached out to superintendents in some districts, and I reached out to some directors and assistant superintendents in some districts just to find out how their systems were going so we could, again, have some confidence in the plan that we made. So again, a process, but I think by doing this process, we made sure that we were listening to the people in our district. We were making sure that we were following OSPI guidance accurately and weren't going to have to pull something back down the road and create more confusion. And I think we ended up, as Dr. Stavrum mentioned, in a different place than maybe we thought we were going to be when we started. And again, that's a result of having a process like this. So the direction, you might be wondering, well, what was that direction? So again, this is where you go, there's some ambiguity there. This was the first thing that came out. It said, do no harm. Well, what does that mean? There were lots of different interpretations of what harm meant. And we'll talk more about it in a little bit. But initially, the guidance from OSPI and informally was, that second semester grades could not be lower than they were at the time of closure. They were saying that's what we meant by do no harm. But as you can imagine, many people thought about, well, what do we mean by harm? And so again, that needed to be clarified in later guidance. They also said that every student would have an opportunity to raise their grade with March 17th, the official closure date, as the baseline. As I mentioned before, no student would receive a pass or a fail or a no credit grade. So again, that basically scrapped our old plan, and that meant that we had to go back to the drawing board. They also let people know that any grade on a transcript would have a designator, a COVID designator, to indicate that that was a grade that was earned in a very unusual set of circumstances. Students would have an opportunity to engage in continuous learning. And then, as I mentioned, teachers would assign incompletes for students who could not engage in an equitable way. Again, that was an area that was open to a lot of interpretation when the initial guidance came out. What did that mean? When could you assign an incomplete? When couldn't you? So again, we didn't want to push too far ahead without being really clear on what that incomplete was. And we were getting indications from OSPI that they were going to provide that follow-up guidance. And so on the 29th, last week, they provided that follow-up guidance. And what that said is that an incomplete was communication that the teacher was not able to determine that proficiency of learning standards for the course were met. And those could be attributed to a variety of reasons. So the student can engage or chose not to engage. And so that in those cases, you could assign an incomplete. Again, before this latest guidance came out, that wasn't very clear. And so we were being careful not to move too far ahead. They also put some strings on assigning an incomplete. That a teacher had to identify the standards the student was unable to meet and the steps to demonstrate those standards. And so you can see in the next bullet point, there are a number of different ways that students will be able to recover their grade if they have an incomplete. And that could be everything from summer school, credit recovery, competency-based credit, similar to what we talked about tonight, independent study. Backfilling grades is when they get a grade in the next course in the sequence. That grade then can be assigned to the earlier course or to that incomplete. So those were all options that OSPI said are possibilities. That's going to be one of our next steps, is to start mapping all of those out and defining when they make most sense and which students would benefit from them, so that when teachers and counselors are meeting with students about opportunities for incompletes, there's very clear direction on how and when to assign those. We also want to be careful that this doesn't become a default, that there should be every way that you can engage a kid is exhausted before you start assigning incompletes. Finally, an incomplete, if it does stay on the transcript, so if the student doesn't replace it with a grade, that would be assigned, it does not affect students' GPA. So again, this was all guidance that we got as recently as last week to help us move forward. So once we had that information, that was helpful. We also, as we mentioned, asked our staff, administrators, students, and families to weigh in on some different options. And we were careful about not pitting people to say, well, which option do you think is best, but more to get to the underlying values that were in those options. So one of the things that our teachers worried about a lot was, if you gave every student an A that had passed, would students continue to engage in learning? If students could maintain the grade that they had at the time of closure, would they continue to maintain? And our teachers really believed, and still do in many cases, that students would not. If you could just keep your grade, you could just check out for the year, right? And that was one of the pieces of guidance that OSPI said, is you can maintain your grade, you can't go lower. And so that was a big significant concern on the part of our teachers. We also asked our parents. It wasn't quite the same level of concern. There were still some there that were concerned about this, but for the most part, teachers or parents said this would be very helpful if my student could, at a minimum, receive the grade they had at the time of closure. But even if you're thinking about assigning an A, like other districts have already done, that actually would be helpful to my student. And then they also believed that their students were very likely to continue to engage in learning, regardless of whether they maintained a grade or received a letter grade that was, like, for example, an A, if they were passing the course. So probably because they're there with their children, they're saying that, yes, I'm going to make sure they're continuing to engage and participate, but I also know my kids will as well. So we had about 1,486 parents respond to that. I mentioned before with teachers, it was about 300, including administrators. This was part of a larger survey we did of all parents in the district and all families in the district, just about overall satisfaction. So this was a subset of the questions for them. And then finally, last week, we asked our students. 5,700 students responded. So that is about 60, I believe 60-ish% of our students in high school right now. So we asked them, how helpful would it be for you to have an A as long as you were passing it this semester? And about 92% said somewhat helpful or very helpful. So they're indicating to us this would actually be a help to me right now. Here was the big question though, and this is where we diverged from what our teachers were saying. How likely are you to continue participating if you were assigned that A, or even if you could just maintain your grade? And again, about 92, 93% said, I'm going to keep participating. We also asked the question in there, is that option of an A or an incomplete something you even want to keep? And about 2.4% said, I'd prefer that not be available. And I can tell you a little bit more about that when we get to the comments. Similarly, if we go back to the parent one, about 9% of our parents said they prefer that A incomplete option not be available. So again, we're getting some interesting information from our folks. And again, I've been doing surveys for a number of years in the district, and this is some of the highest numbers we've had in an individual survey that I've participated in, particularly at a student level. Finally, we also looked at our attendance and connection. And so you remember last week we said that we were having teachers indicate in our Skyward attendance system students that were not connecting in any way to school. And so at the end of the week, they indicated, I haven't had any connection with the student. We got the results of that recently, and at the high school level, it was about 8% of our students in grades 9 through 12 had at least 3 classes where there were no connections. So these are students that we're not hearing from for those classes. And those numbers are pretty significant when you look at it by subgroup. So for example, 27% of our students receiving free and reduced price lunch, at least 3 no connections. So we're starting to see that this closure is having a disproportionate impact on groups of our students. That was starting to sway our thinking as well. So as Dr. Staba mentioned when we started, and as I mentioned when we started, we were going, yeah, A, B, C, D letter grades and an incomplete, that's the way we should go. Then we start hearing from students about the impact that grades have on them and how likely they are to participate. Then we start seeing a disproportionate impact of this closure on groups of our students. And this is not a clean, tight comparison, and Tim Krieger asked to be really thoughtful and careful, but typically about 4% of our students are absent, chronically absent in a given time. And so again, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but this is a fairly high rate of no connection, and it gets more significant again as you look at different groups in our population. We also looked at just what are our grade distributions like normally, and again, normally about 50% of our students are getting A's for semester 2 grades. That was pretty close for semester 1 as well. And at the time of closure, it was about 55%. So again, quite a few students already receiving A's, but also a number of students that are in that B through D range that are in that mix. And so we're thinking about, well, what would the impact of their grade be if they can't be participating in school? So then we looked at neighboring districts and kind of see what was happening in those. And so these are districts that we have connections with through those networks I was mentioning earlier. So we're on weekly conference calls with Puget Sound Educational Service District and regional superintendents. And so these were districts that had already committed to some form of grading model before we got to this point today. And so you can kind of see where districts are. Seattle came out very early with the AI. A number of districts are doing A through D, and then there's some that are in the middle. For example, North Shore just announced at the end of last week they were going to do an A-B combination. And we as a group, our task force, looked at all of these, pros and cons, and advantages and disadvantages, but kept coming back to what's the impact on our students? Every single one of our students, what's the impact? So as a result of that, we looked at having our groups kind of weigh in on what was their thinking as they looked through all that information, looked at the survey results, looked at parent, student, and teacher comments, looked at how other districts were working through this, started to think through some of the impacts. And what we did is we had each of the members kind of rank their first choice, second choice, third choice, and fourth choice for AI as the options AB, ABC, or ABCD as the grading system that you could use. And it turned out on that first day that we did this, the AI option was coming out as overall kind of the top choice, but you can see that there were some folks that this was not the top choice. Some of our teachers were still expressing concerns about student participation. So what we did at that point is we said, well, let's call some of these districts that are in this boat. And so we called Mercer Island, we called Bellevue, we talked to folks there and said, are students checking out? Because they've had their systems in place for a number of days already. Are students saying that they don't care about their learning anymore? How are teachers responding? And what we heard from those districts is, one, kids were participating at the same rates. They were still engaged deeply in learning, and they did not see a decline in their participation. Two, there wasn't a huge parent pushback or community pushback. That both districts said their community kind of understood the rationale and it made sense to them and it addressed their needs. And so after that information, we came back to our group, shared that with them and said, okay, if we were going to re-rank these, where would we land? And in the first day, the group said, you know what, we really don't think having a D in the system makes a lot of sense, because that, for many colleges, is seen as a failing grade as well. And so we ranked our 3 remaining choices. And again, came out about the same, though some of our teachers in the group were going, yeah, I'm warming up a little bit. I can see that districts that have done this have addressed the engagement concern, and so that was part of the movement. We also asked our high school principals to weigh in, again, gave them similar information about survey results, neighboring districts, where our committee was landing. So this represents each of the high school principals in our district. And again, as they started thinking through it and the implications, they started to go, at first we were really thinking that this ABCDI makes a lot of sense. It keeps kids engaged, it recognizes their hard work, and that makes a lot of sense when we started. And then we started talking about the implications, and they started to come across. Those implications, as I mentioned, really came from our student comments. We had students that said, typically I'm an A-level student, and in normal times I'm in a classroom and I might have B's and maybe even a C or 2 during the year at the beginning, but by the end of the year I've typically brought my grades back up to A's. What's happening now is I don't have that same capacity. Students said to us, I'm watching my siblings and I just don't have the same bandwidth. I have a job so that I can bring some income into our family. Both my parents are essential workers. We're competing for bandwidth. And I just don't have the same level of ability to bring my grade up. And that translated into very real, very negative impacts on our students. And I'll give you a few examples. One is a student that has straight A's, and these were actual students that said this, that had grades that were in the BC range at the closure. And they're saying, I don't know if I'm going to be able to bring those grades up. Those are students that are going to be applying for scholarships, that are going to be applying for colleges. For example, the university, or the Washington State University, has guaranteed admission for students that have a 3.5 GPA. Well, a student whose grade dropped by even 1 letter grade in 2 to 3 classes would drop below that threshold, 0.1 or 0.2 in their GPA. So that could make an impact on students getting into college. It could make an impact on whether or not they had to take an SAT or ACT test. It could impact their scholarships. In addition, we know that Seattle and Bellevue and Mercer Island have about 20,000 students in grades 9 through 12 right now. Those students in grades 9 through 11 in coming years are going to be applying to the University of Washington. They're going to be applying to Washington State University. They're going to be applying to our regional colleges and universities. Those students are all going in with a GPA that reflects A systems. Our students are going to be applying right side by side with those students. And so again, there was a clear connection to our students could be disadvantaged by competing with other students in the region who are applying to colleges and universities with a higher GPA than many of our students would be able to achieve in the current situation. So we could point to student after student who we had seen had high GPAs that may not have the same GPA as they would if they were in a school setting, in a classroom setting, that would be impacted. We were seeing that was an equitable system, that having an ABCD makes a lot of sense in normal times. I was a former high school teacher. I really thought carefully about the integrity of the grading system I used and all of the things that went into it. But I also know that the students were in my class and I had some control over how that was working. We don't have that same control anymore. In fact, many of our teachers are in situations that are putting them at a diminished capacity. And so to say to our students, we're going to hold you to those same standards as we do in normal times just didn't make as much sense as we started to look at it and we started to hear from our students. Now, I will say that there were some families and some students that also said, you're undermining the hard work that I've put in. And our thinking about that is, again, who is harmed when we say to students, we're going to keep an A, B, C, and maybe an A, B, C, D grading system. Students that have their A's and can keep their A's are not harmed. Students who can't, though, could be. And so by using an AI system, we can guarantee that no student in our system, based on their conditions at home, would be negatively impacted. And students who have A's and would have earned A's anyway are not going to be negatively impacted either. So again, we're recognizing these are very unusual times, that an A in this system is not the same as an A in normal system. It's going to be designated that way on the transcript. And if we're really truly going to say we're doing no harm to any of our students for conditions that are outside of their control, this is the best system that we can do right now. It's closest to the past no credit system that we originally had talked about. It allows students to maintain their grades, and it really acknowledges the conditions that a significant portion of our students are in. We know it's not perfect, and we know some people will be uncomfortable because it disrupts our way of thinking about grades, but as we think about our state of the world right now, this seems to be the best approach. I did share with you a number of the comments that were provided by students. Again, over 5,000 students participated, 5,700 students participated, and I'd say 80 to 90% of them gave comments, and the bulk of those comments really were, I'm in a tough spot right now, stressful, there's lots of things going on in our lives. This system that really simplifies and acknowledges that system is really going to make a difference for me and help me. So our plan, as we landed on this, is an AI system similar to what's being used in Bellevue and Mercer Island and Seattle. Moving forward, the next steps would be to share this information with our principals and teachers tomorrow and our families by the end of the day tomorrow or early Wednesday, so that our teachers can continue to move on. The last thing I would say is that this system really does match up with our current way of assigning grades. So teachers will continue to assign grades. They'll assign grades to work. They'll keep their grade books. Any passing grade of the semester is converted to an A, but we also retain that grade book information. So as we're thinking about our 9th and 11th grade students, for example, moving forward, we have information we can go back in and look at to see what kind of performance were they having. And we can also look at first semester grades. So we retain information about student performance, but again, we're not harming students. So again, not a perfect situation, not a perfect solution, but it's the best one, I think, right now when we think about having equitable outcomes for all of our students and families.
So a great deal of process has gone into this, and I think, you know, initially your first reaction is what Mike said. People may say it devalues the work that a student has done up to this time, and that work is still there. It's still reflected in GPA. It's going to be reflected after they move forward, and so this is for this period of time. So with that, any questions or comments from board members?
I just wanted to say thank you. That's a lot of thoughtful effort that went into this. I know it's not the fastest decision on these things, but I think it's the right decision. At the end of the day, do no harm is a good thing, and right now we all need a little grace. I mean, no matter who you're Zooming with, you need a little bit of, and when they go to apply to college, I think that the rules are going to be completely revamped by the time this year's juniors send in their applications. So there will be a COVID asterisk on every transcript.
Yes,
So,
and that's one of the factors, is there is still a marker that identifies this was not normal times with grading. So that was also part of our thinking. Mark, your hand is up.
Yes, I understand the parents' concern about whether it's grade inflation, if you want to call it that, or are dismissing their efforts to date. You know, I can't imagine the rest of the states not having the same consideration that Washington is giving their students. So I really think that our parents, I hope they would be thinking or realizing that other schools outside of the state of Washington are probably going to have the same reaction to the grades for this semester. I can't imagine a school trying to punish a student for this global pandemic that no one could have come into or could have planned for. So I would hope that everyone's anxiety levels will go down at least one notch or two, because I think that all these states will have the same reaction.
Yeah, stressful time, and I think that's one thing that really woke us up with some of the comments, and just in hearing some of the things that families are dealing with for this prolonged stretch. There's a difference in even the duration for Washington. As I've said before, you've heard me say this now a few times, is we were amongst the earliest in the nation to close, and we have some of the latest ending points for our school year. This is a long haul, even if we were to just have started right now until the end of the year. And so I think we have to recognize that we've got a really prolonged version of this point in time that's really difficult for families. If you had an A, you get to keep your A. If you were on your way to an A, you get to keep an A, and it is still not going to have a significant impact. One of the things we talked about, if you had a GPA at a certain rate, this A isn't going to swing it drastically in one direction or another. And so we also didn't feel like it was diminishing because it wasn't going to all of a sudden make every student into a 4.0 student. But it also wasn't going to take you backwards from where you were, which is the goal. Eric, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Jane, Mike, Tim, everyone else who worked on this. I just want to say thank you so much for the process that we went through. I think it's wonderful. It's clear that we were really thoughtful and very disciplined about how we were thinking about this, and that shows. And I also really appreciate that we thought about this through an equity lens too. That's been a priority for the board. It's clear that that's a priority for the district. And thank you for sharing also the findings tonight with what we know about our participation rates and how this has disproportionately affected our students. That's really important to remember when we think about how we're going about this grading system. So anyway, I just wanted to say kudos. I think we landed on the right result, and even more important, we went about it in the right process.
Thank you. Cassandra, your hand is up.
I'm jumping the line, but thank you for calling on me. I also would like to thank Mike and team for this work that is very emotional, because you're trying to always do the very best thing for kids. And a week ago, I wouldn't have said the district was at this point. And thanks to Tim Krieger and all the data that you've been able to collect on who is participating, who is not participating, how does that break out by free and reduced lunch? How does that break out by special education and English language learners? That makes a huge difference to know all of that. And I appreciate that this is where you've landed.
Thank you. Siri?
Yeah, I just want to say, again, I'll just reiterate the thank you that you heard. As we go through this process and this goes in, these issues around grades and equity, it's not a new issue. It has been there for a long time, and this sort of exacerbated the issues that we already addressed. So I hope through this process we'll collect information and to think about how might this impact us in the future of how we think about our grading and what we do and the ways that we do that. Because knowing that we have standards-based grading in our elementary schools, I know we attempted it at one point in our middle schools. So I would just hope this is an opportunity for a great learning lesson, that we're beginning an opportunity. Let's really dive into what does it mean to have grades in this setting and in this environment, and how do people respond? So thank you.
Yes, and Mark.
Say, Mike, what additional efforts are being made on the disconnected students, if you will, whether that's free or reduced, or the other students that you broke out? Aside from the fact that we took into consideration what impact that has on their grades, are there some extra outreach going out to those kids to see what we can do to help them during this time?
Yeah, we're working on that on a number of levels. We just asked last week, each building has a plan and shares a plan for how they are reaching out to families. We're helping to define teacher expectations. So what's that reasonable first contact, first effort, and then what triggers you to do that kind of second tier of notifying your building administration and counselor that there needs to be additional, more concerted efforts. We also have data for each school. And there were a number of our schools that had much higher rates of no connection. And again, schools with higher percentages of students who were receiving free and reduced price lunch meals was an example of that. And so now we're looking at, can we start to assign additional supports to that school that can help to reach out to families, say by phone later in the afternoon when they may be home from work. So for example, if you're calling during the day, you may not get someone, but if you call later on, or translation services, there's a whole team Matt Gillingham's working with to do how do we get language barriers and how do we address language barriers. So having that data that Tim Krieger put together, and I think you saw in your in Power BI, is really helping us to be more targeted and thoughtful about how we approach the work and apply resources where they're needed most.
And we're going to talk about that just a little bit more coming up with Tim, who can even add a little bit more context around that. So thank you for the question, Mark. This was not an easy decision. We wrestled this around. We had arguments. We had conversations, and they're good arguments because this is important stuff for now and for later. And there are multiple schools of thought around this. I think many districts are looking at this through an equity lens, and I think you never want to feel like you are lowering standards, but what we kept coming back to is this is not a normal time. And so how do we acknowledge that in the very best ways? And hats off to Mike and our whole team, because it was a good process and it did take more time, but I think we all feel really good about where we came to. And I just heard a quote the other day that kind of rang my bell with, how we evolved in this decision. And it basically says it does no good for a person to have a mind if the mind cannot be changed. And I think we all felt like we had the information that we needed to feel like we were able to change our minds if we started in a different place and we know why we're doing what we're doing, and that's important to always know the why behind it. So we'll be moving forward with sharing that information, and we'll be able to discuss it further, and the district will discuss that moving along as we then are faced with some decisions next fall. So with that, I am going to move us on to kind of another big piece of our current work, which everybody is thinking about. And I will tell you, districts are still very much in process with this decision. I just saw a spreadsheet today. ESD was compiling a list of districts. I can't remember if it was ESD or OSPI, but essentially looking at what districts are doing for graduation. And Dale is on our meeting with us tonight. He'll give us kind of an update of where we are. But I think a lot of the decisions being made by districts have to do with the size of the district and the feasibility of what the district can organize versus what community members may organize. And so it's an important distinction to think about what we as a district are going to do to recognize that important milestone and what may be outside of what the district would be thinking about in terms of other ways to recognize students. We were just doing simple math the other day. If you have hundreds of students in a class and you think about the time it takes to have them each do something, you may be at 5 days worth of hours that it would take to do some of the things that may take another district 2 hours to do or even 3 hours to do. And so we have size that we have to look at. We also have the guidance that is still in place, and we were waiting to see what that guidance said last Friday. And we know that the restrictions are still going to be pretty tight. And so there are some things that we're going to need to begin landing on as for sure things, as well as maybe some other things that are possible, but probably at this point, not highly likely. So with that, I'm going to ask Dale to give us an update on what our high school principals are working on with their students and staff, and where we're beginning to kind of give some shape to what we think we're going to be able to do.
Sure, great. Good evening. Thank you, Jane. I'll share a few things with you. Obviously, the governor's extension of the stay-at-home order and the phased approach to reopening still isn't going to allow us for a traditional in-person graduation. I don't think anybody really anticipated that would be really a viable option. And working with principals and central leadership as well, one of the things that we know we can do, and they're all working on it now, is do a virtual graduation using a vendor. We had a group of people kind of vet the various vendors that are all putting products forward for virtual graduations. We landed on Jostens or Herff Jones, and those are companies that you probably have heard of who provide caps and gowns and a variety of other services. And their products are really good. I mean, the virtual graduations will really can encompass all the components specific to each high school and whatever their traditions may be, whether it's speakers and musical performances and so on, where they would gather that together, be something that graduates and families can take with them throughout. So that's one thing that we know that we can and are working on doing right now. We have the prior meeting right before Governor Inslee's press conference last Friday. We're struggling with next steps, so we decided we'd wait until after his conference to decide what was coming out. So he has 3 phases, as you probably know. We're going to work with the Emergency Operations Center that we have, and I've talked with Matt Gillingham a little bit, who oversees that, and they're going to quickly work on what are the possibilities given 3 phases. What are the guidelines we can do if phase 3 is in place by the time graduation comes? What are the guidelines that would be in place if it's phase 2, or certainly where we're at now? It's interesting because we as a district have not always overseen every single piece of graduation. And what I mean by that is I've helped coordinate what used to be Key Arena, as you know, or now keep calling it Heck Ed. I'm just going to keep on calling it Heck Ed. And of course then Juanita, where we coordinate contracts and times and locations, and then the schools really develop their program. And even prior to that, schools decide when and how they're going to hand out their caps and gowns. It's not something that we've ever really processed through. And I know there's been some communication very recently about caps and gowns that I can speak to, that I will hear in a minute. So right now, I put out to the high school principals that we need to coordinate centrally more of the communication that's going out and all of the pieces related to your graduation, because unfortunately, we're not going to be able to celebrate it in the ways that we want to. I myself have a senior in college, and so Mother's Day was going to be his graduation day, so that's no more. So I get it on a long levels. So we're going to be meeting with high school principals again on Wednesday to talk about what does that coordination look like, and what are your plans beginning to look like. They are currently working with their student leaders, and I don't mean just leadership, I mean clubs and other groups within their schools, to be able to get their input and their voice, working with PTSAs and parents about what their interests are. Right now, the guidelines require some pretty tight ability to do some things. So schools do have guidelines. Most guidelines were put out because many students have to go pick up their musical instruments, or they need some curricular material now that we're going the way we're going with remote learning. And so with that, with EOC, we have guidelines to go and allow them to pick things up safely and within the stay-at-home orders. So, for example, caps and gowns. I know one school had an event that they had planned with caps and gowns, and they were going to have staff line their driveway, really well intended. Staff missed students missed school, they had signs up. And the principal decided to hold on because they certainly didn't want to conflict with what we previously set out, which having to do with the lights being on in the stadiums, where we said no parade, we can't have people gather. And so I believe their intention was to postpone. I'm trying to connect with that principal today. I believe their intention was to postpone for good reasons, because if there's phase 2 or phase 3 that allows some groups to come together, then maybe they can hand out caps and gowns with staff present. Another school wasn't planning on having staff present, and they were just going about their normal process and put out, hey, we're going to distribute caps and gowns. And I think that's a really good example of why we're pulling together and being more tight on our communication about what's going out, because those things get misinterpreted. How come they get to it and we can't? Those sort of things. So we're working to have school celebrations in whatever form they may take, be more alike than different. That's another challenge I'm trying to anticipate. I'll give you an example. Really well-intended parents at one of our comprehensive high schools was starting to work with the city about a drive-through event of about 500 seniors. And so I believe the city said no regarding the traffic and police and all of that. They said no to that. Well, what if we had another high school and that jurisdiction was fine and helped coordinate that? Now we have two schools playing off of one another, and I think that can create some challenges. So we have to think about more alike than different. So they are beginning to work on what might it look like. Can we do some things that are spaced out? Obviously, our smaller choice schools, when there's 40 students up to maybe 100 some students, might be able to coordinate something in person a little bit different. But we'll know more after working with our ELC and the guidelines and the three-phased pieces that the governor put out. And again, the coordination of communications being pulled back in more. Now, I can help answer any questions, Dr. Saban, unless there's anything else you want me to address.
No, I think it's just, we want to be coordinated with the things that we know we can do. And I think, you've seen videos that are all over the country of different things that are happening. Those are typically things organized by community versus the school district and schools. So I think we have to be focused in on what can the district do. And there are some things that our communities may end up doing, but we have to make sure that we have the right level of collaboration, or we say, you know what, that's a community thing. We're going to work on the school things. And like I said, if you have 500 seniors and you give each senior 5 minutes, Chris, you can do the math, but I believe it amounts to about 5 days worth of, what that would look like if we tried to do some version of a, come in and do a thing. And maybe that's what we end up doing, but there are some things that are less feasible when you have multiple high schools than if you only have one, and, function of size. That being said, I just think we can't underestimate the amount of disappointment and grief and loss that our students feel. And I was telling our district leaders last week, I was part of a meeting, and it talked about the importance of rituals and what those rituals mean and why we have them and how they define these parts of our lives. And so some of what we are doing now, kids will remember, yep, we were that wacky year that, we weren't able to have graduation, but parents feel that loss. Some of you have that as parents of current seniors this year. We have staff members who are experiencing this, and it's really tough. I keep trying to think of how I would have felt as a high school senior if I lost my graduation. I don't know, and I can't say I know what that feels like because I'm not there now, and kids are. But I do know as a parent, as some of us have talked about, it was kind of about me when my child graduated and what I did to get them there. And it's return on investment that you kind of lose that whole ability to say, wow, look what our son or daughter did, and look what we did as a family, and look what this means in terms of sending them off into the big world. So it's a huge loss. And so what we want to do is do our very best to recognize that ritual, to recognize that accomplishment, to give them something to remember, and then down the line to have some shared experience that they can remember back to and come back to and say, look what our version of this was, and still celebrate the milestone. So Dale will plan to get an update from you that we'll send out as a board brief. Questions from board members or comments?
I just want to say thank you. As the parent of a senior. I mean, the irony is that the seniors who are losing graduation in normal context, they don't know what they're losing. They haven't done it before. For those of us who are the parents, there's a lot of mourning going on. It's significant grief about a rite of passage where our kids are supposed to go off into the world and succeed in whatever's next, and we don't get closure. And the other piece is that I'm not sure that my kids really understand that they're not going to get to say goodbye to their teachers.
Not in the same ways, yeah.
That's
Right. Yeah.
Just that whole sense of closure with the people who have helped you to get to that milestone it's a big loss.
So anyway, I appreciate what you're doing and what you're trying to do, and there's not a good or right answer. I think that trying to coordinate is the right thing to do. There's no question that in terms of the on-time event can only be virtual. It's not going to happen otherwise. The only thing I wanted to just sort of throw it out there. I've mentioned this to Jane in passing, but this might be the one year that we want to coordinate a one-year reunion. Because, you know, next summer, if the kids and the teachers are still around, we could get them back together and at least do it late. So anyway,
Yeah.
lots of crazy ideas, and I appreciate the creativity you're trying to put into this mess. It's not an easy solution.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Okay, well, we'll keep working on this and updating. I do think we need to start to get information out there soon, and we've talked about that as a group, that people are wanting to know kind of one thing or another, and part of handing out caps and gowns is making sure that anything else we're going to do is that kids still have hold of those, you know, and don't do some ceremonial act that might eliminate their ability to wear that cap and gown for another purpose. So we want to be cautious, but we also know people want pictures and want to begin doing their own versions of celebrations apart from what school will do with their family and friends. So we want to honor that as well.
Yeah. Well, what's not lost on principals and myself as a former principal is the fact that really this graduation is really, it's not just about the students. It really is the whole family. You know, things have a beginning, a middle, and an end for a reason, and not to have an end or closure. And Director Carlson mentioned about even saying goodbye to your teachers, or even friends that are acquaintances versus your close friends. And so we'll keep working on it and try to be as creative as we can.
Yeah, and I would just also say staff and their accomplishment in what they have sent out as our, you know, product of culminating work. So loss all the way around. Okay, to finish up the last piece of my report, which is reports with other people for my report, is we said we were going to target some benchmarks, and Tim has put together the Power BI indicators that we sent out for your review. And so I've asked Tim just to give an overview and to see if you had any questions about what it is that we've put together. So Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen.
And Tim, I would also like to say I hope the fourth was with you today.
It was.
Tim is a fan. I had to remember who it was, and they reminded it was you. Today's Star Wars, May the 4th be with you. So we want to give you props for that.
Great, thank you. I just want to confirm you can see my screen.
That's a yes.
Perfect, thank you. So I've shared a report with you that visualizes some of the measures related to remote learning, and I just wanted to walk through just a couple of the pages and just make a few comments and then see if you had any questions. The first thing is I want to look at the overview. These are two of our main measures. One is students are connected in all their classes, and then basically online activity from the student. The first measure is if a teacher mark the student as connected or not. And so if we look holistically overall during the first week of remote learning, 82% of our students, K-12, were marked as connected in all classes, and this last week it was 82.7%. This is a little bit of a, how do you say, it's a measure that's you want to dig into a little bit more. There's a filter over here that we can look at elementary. So you see at elementary, most of our elementary students are connected in all classes. Well, one of the things with that is they only have one class. Versus when you look at middle school, the all classes goes down, and very similar in high school as well. So that's why we have this second measure, which is students connected in at least 4 of their classes. So at middle, that would be 4 of 6, and at high school, it would be 4 of 7. And then lastly, we have this online activity measure, which is we're able to see when students log into PowerSchool, which is our learning management system, when they had any OneDrive activity. So for example, they saved any files in their OneDrive, when they've logged into Microsoft Teams, when they've used their school email, and at elementary when they've used Lexia and Dreambox. So K-12, a high proportion of our students are doing at least one of those things. However, I think the thing that we really are looking at that's concerning is when you look at this by demographic. So this is for our most recent week. We can look at the same connected in all classes, connected in at least for an online activity, and we can see gaps for students from low-income households, students who are receiving special education services, and then race, ethnicity. All of these data points can be disaggregated by level. So this would be looking at elementary. You'll notice the middle disappears because we don't use that middle measure for elementary. And then lastly, it's helpful to know what online activities students are doing. And so we can break that down into like PowerSchool, OneDrive, Teams, student email, and then Lexi and Dreambox at the elementary level. You'll notice things have been relatively consistent. The one thing that we see this last week was a big jump in the use of Microsoft Teams. Two other non-remote learning, well, somewhat non-remote learning measures are meals served per week. That just shows you the growth over time of that. And then these are the technology requests broken down by elementary hotspots, laptops, and secondary hotspots.
So what I've asked Tim to do is, as we get weekly updates to this, is just to provide some brief narrative that we'll put in board briefs so that you can hear any trend or analysis, just for things to look for. Tim, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Are you?
Yeah. No. In terms of if you know, the high level things are relatively consistent from last week to this week. We do have a few things. If we look at students from low-income households, there's been a slight increase in terms of connected in all classes, and you can see that in elementary, 5% more, a little bit in middle, and then I think actually high it dropped just a little bit, but probably statistically insignificant. But overall, week over week, it's relatively consistent. There was a question about, I think, or at least it was inferred, about what else do we do with this data. So this data does go to the principals for the students in their school. So they're getting actually the student level, name by name of these kids. I'm providing them the contact information in the same file that I'm sending them, so they have all the information about a student in one place, and then they can follow up as needed.
Questions, comments for Tim or any of us?
Not really a question, just thank you for making this available. This is interesting to see, and I am intrigued by the your 4 classes. Are the kids not interested in coming to English class, or anyway? So I'm intrigued by which class is not being shown up for them. If it's PE, I can understand why PE isn't happening at the high school level.
Cassandra, you had your hand up?
I did. I'd like to thank you for the detail and these demographic breakouts. It really helped me to see the inequities that existed before a global pandemic, of course, continue to exist. I'm wondering if in the future we will be able to look at, okay, here's a student who is free and reduced lunch and EL and also happens to be in special education. Is that too deep into the weeds right now, and at some point we'll know those?
So you could actually do that with this. You can say, and then go down here to the filter, and then you could say low income.
Oh, I see.
Student,
yep, you can set your filters.
So so you can kind of filter down. You just have to remember that even though this is low income, you filtered it for special education.
Right.
But these filters do work for all the kind of crosstab that you want to look at.
Thank you. And just a comment.
Then you can.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and you hover over, you can see what the count of students is.
Thank you. Kind of like I suspected. people who were having a tough time before are continuing to have a tough time. And then just a comment on following up with students that a teacher has not heard back from. We didn't actually know our student had PE this quarter, and we got a call from the PE teacher asking us if we were interested in participating. So I will say that follow-up is happening. At least it happened in our household, and I hope that we can continue trying to reach out.
Great. Siri.
Yeah, just thank you very much. It is helpful to get an idea of sort of how it's going, and appreciate that we'll be getting that weekly update. How that feeds through, and ideally that we see those shifts along the ways of at least maintaining engagement and trying to improve that along the way. I think those are great things to be able to see as the remote learning hitting at least a minimum that we're looking for. Appreciate also the definitions that were provided to make it clear as to how engagement actually was being done, because that helps to be able to understand what the data is really telling us. So appreciate all the work that went into that and pulling a variety of different data sets together into one place to give a better picture of what's happening and being able to improve what we're doing throughout this process. So it'll be interesting as the grade piece comes out, we actually can utilize this data to help look at how that might be impacted. So nicely done.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I think my report, including lots of others' reports, is concluded, and I just can't say how proud I am of our whole team. They've put in lots of hours, as you can see, to really feel like we have tried our best to do what's right for students and to do it in the ways that make sense and to know the why behind what we've put in place. And you know, it's not easy to make these big decisions. And so we'll keep moving ahead and see what the data tells us. I also am interested to see what the data says, just given the duration of what we're asking people to do. And so we're doing everything we can to prop people up social emotionally as well as academically, and it's that blend of helping people do their very best as we continue. So thank you for your attention to all of those big things.
All right, and with that, we've concluded the superintendent report, hitting on some key points. Our next item is board member comments. Is there any comments that board would have?
I believe Mr. Stewart has a comment.
Actually, if I can start with Director Carlson, and then we will go to Director Stewart.
Oh, no, actually, I was going to say I have no comments, so go for it, Mark.
Okay, Director Stewart, please, then Director Sage.
Well, I just wanted to note that one of the things we always kind of bury in the consent calendar is the personnel reports, but there's a teacher retiring from Frost with 45 years of service, which to me is amazing anywhere. And I just thought it should be recognized. I think Simonson, as I recall, he started in fall of 19. I was in high school in 72, and I'm imagine some of you weren't even, well, we won't go there. But congratulations, Judy, for hanging in all those.
Yeah, and that's one, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's one of the areas of planning right now, because that's another lost ritual, is the recognition of our retirees and even people who are resigning. We aren't going to have that same level of closure and recognition, so we're working on how we can do that and still honor those folks who have given years of service to our district and allow them to have that occasion in the best way that we can, but it won't be the same. And I feel badly for those people who have had a whole career, even part of a career with us, who aren't going to get to say goodbye and have those parties and just those gatherings that mean so much. They may be able to do some version of them maybe by the end of the year, but we know that's another one of those lost pieces. So thank you for bringing attention to that, Mark, and we'll hope to do that for all of our retirees.
Yes, thank you. Director Sage?
Oh, well, I will just second that. Congratulations for Judy, since my kids have experience with her, and 3 of them have now graduated. So they graduated before she did, apparently. I also wanted to point out that there's groups in our neighborhoods and our communities that are very interested in helping kids. I was at the Redmond Kiwanis meeting on Friday. Mark was also there with me online. And a group obviously dedicated to kids and wanting to know how to help. So I want to make sure that when there is a group of, you know, community members that want to help, there is a place for them to go and let the district know, hey, here's what we have capacity for, what you got for us.
Yeah, and I think there are some ways, and we talked about that with that particular group. I think also our community organizations are finding ways to do that alongside of us. And right now, it's not as easy for us to plug in people. And so I love it that we have a blend of that, but we certainly don't want to prohibit people from helping families. I've seen, I just saw online today an example of a cul-de-sac that happened to have some retired teachers in it, and they organized their own little helpline for the kids right in their neighborhood. You know, things like that. We want people to do that, and some people have mobilized around a number of different things. So we'll do our very best to help connect or give ideas and, you know, try and help people connect in the ways that they can connect. A lot of it right now is even just encouraging people. So there's ways that we can help with that. Mark, you had your hand up again?
Yes. I was wondering if we can have a future update on what's going on with the Transition Academy, and it's being displaced by a construction project, not of our making, but the shopping center they're in is being going up 5 floors. So I just thought I'd check in and say maybe we could have an update in the future on that. Seems like there's one other thing that's all of a sudden eluding me. I guess that'll work.
Was it Old Redmond?
No, I wasn't even thinking of Old Redmond, but I was guessing that might be where the transition kids are going, but that's beside the point. Anyway, if I think of it before we go off the air, I'll let you know.
All right. Yes, and we can do an update on that.
Any other board member comments? Neither hearing nor seeing none, we will go on. So just to review our upcoming board meetings, our next one will be for May 18th. It would also be virtual as well, starting at 5 p.m. And with that, sorry, there it just went. The board will now convene into executive session for 30 minutes for the purpose to discuss potential litigation. And when we reconvene, the board will be taking no action. And so with that, we will now convene into executive session.
Thank you.
See you soon.
So we will